So, I like Good Mythical Morning. Good Mythical Morning, or GMM, in case you're unaware, is a weekdaily YouTube show that is hosted by the internet comedians Rhett and Link Neal, or just Rhett and Link. Now, I will confess that I don't watch every single GMM episode, but I have been following them semi-actively since 2017-ish. And there are especially certain formats of GMM episodes that I'm a big fan of, and it's just a very nice and goofy kind of show to watch. And the main thing that makes it so entertaining, of course, is the interplay between Rhett and Link, who are both lifelong friends and comedy partners. And let's face it, a big part of the appeal is all the ways that Rhett makes fun of Link, because Link is a little bit special. In fact, Link can be a pretty aggravating butthole from time to time. That definitely feeds into the comedy of the series. Link has the palate of a child, he's generally quite terrible in most of the games, and whenever anything goes wrong on the show, he's always ready to blame everybody else except himself. But let's face it, Rhett can be obnoxious as well. In fact, whenever Rhett is obnoxious, it's actually even more noticeable because most of the time he acts like, a normal human being. So this video is all about the 5 incidents where I think Rhett was incredibly obnoxious and annoying on GMM. And now I realize most of these were just for comedy purposes or whatever, but it's just that in my personal opinion, Rhett really crossed the line on a few occasions here. And like a lot of other GMM fans, I tend to re-watch a lot of old GMM episodes. Whenever some of these pop up somewhere along there, I'm always reminded of, oh yeah, I hated that. These examples are gonna go more or less from the least egregious to the most egregious, and the final example isn't even technically from a GMM episode. And the first couple of ones are ones that used to happen a relatively long time ago, so that's why these don't really bother me that much anymore. And because I'm Finnish, we're of course going to start with all the times that Rhett insisted that Finland isn't a real country. This was even the subject of a one GMM episode a long time ago. And it basically turned into a running joke where Rhett would just insist that whenever Finland came up in any future GMM episodes that Finland isn't a real country. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm a Finn. Whenever Finland comes up in any international context, I'm always really happy. So when this ludicrous Finland isn't a real country meme was brought up on GMM for the first time, I was obviously quite happy about it. But the thing that you need to understand about Rhett is that he's the kind of comedian who will run a joke to the ground. I mean, if it doesn't get a laugh the first time, he'll just keep doing it until you're eventually kind of browbeat into laughing just because of the repetition. But there's only so many times that you can have somebody just tell you that your country isn't real, where it really starts to kind of get old and honestly, even a little bit insulting. Now, like I said, Rhett did milk this joke a long time ago. That Finland episode is almost a decade old anyway at this point. Though it did crop up relatively recently in the International Sausage Dishes episode. Next up is the Tokyo what? Seriously, this one I found genuinely annoying even back in the day. In the very old GMM episodes, whenever the name of the city of Tokyo was mentioned on the show, Rhett would go into this long yell of what for supposedly comedic effect. Now, I'm pretty sure they only did it like maybe a dozen times, and most of those were probably repeats because they would do it like multiple times within the same episode. But it's one of those things that whenever it comes up when I watch old GMM episodes, that's a signal to me to start fast forwarding because, yeah, it wasn't really that much fun. It's really like old YouTube, make a loud noise because it's funny. I guess they must have really been proud of the graphic that they made up for it. That's the only reason I can think of why they kept doing it so much. Now, these next couple of examples come from one of my favorite GMM formats, which is the International Darts. This is a game where Rhett and Link will eat a food from somewhere in the world and then try to guess what the country is by throwing a dart at it. This is one of my all-time favorites alongside the shuffleboard game, Scornhole, Calorie Blackjack. Most of these competition-style episodes are my favorites. But the International Darts one is the oldest format, and it is therefore kind of a classic. It's also one of the few formats where I always find myself kind of rooting for Link because he is just legendarily bad at most of the competition-style games. Now, not to take anything away from Rhett, Rhett has an impressive knowledge of world cuisine, which is one of the reasons why he's always so OP in the GMM darts game. And I get the feeling that both of these examples illustrate that maybe Rhett was starting to feel a little self-conscious about the fact that the only thing he ever did in these darts episodes was show up, eat some food, throw a dart, and then win the game. So they started incorporating all kinds of comedy bits into these episodes in order to elongate them. Now, some of these comedy bits I think were genuinely quite funny. Like when they started having voice clips of their parents just randomly show up. I thought that was kind of an endearing thing to do. But then for some of these, not only were the jokes not that funny, after a while I got kind of sick and tired of them as well. The first one was Rhett's many cameras. Now the thing about this one is that it actually started off kind of innocent and fun. It started off basically with Rhett making a passing comment how he'd love to have a camera so that he could get an over-the-shoulder shot of Link throwing his darts. And then they managed to get an old TV camera for him to shoot. I mean, the camera quality was horrible because they probably didn't set it up right or whatever. But, it started organically and it was a kind of a cute moment. And then Rhett started having a hidden camera in increasingly ludicrous props that he would bring onto the show. And the thing that annoys me about these camera bits is the fact that Link was obviously never told what the camera or the prop would be. But this one isn't that horrible because it usually just slowed the game down a little bit during the early part of the episode. Most of the time then Link just chose not to even acknowledge the prop. In fact, by complete happenstance, I think I found what was the final video in this whole hidden camera arc, which was Rhett pretending that there was a GoPro inside a little Christmas present, then let Link open it only to discover that there was actually no camera inside. So it was obnoxious, but it was kind of a harmless bit. What I thought was a lot more obnoxious was Herb the Globe. Basically, a couple of years ago, Rhett got himself a radio-controlled puppet globe that he would voice with a screechy, annoying voice and distract Link while he was throwing his darts. Now, the thing that made Herb horrible is if you look at Link's reaction, it is very obvious that he was completely unaware that this was a thing that was going to happen. And I know, that was probably why they did it. They wanted to get Link's genuine reaction. The problem is that it becomes very evident very quickly that Link is having none of it. He is not engaging with this bit at all, and is trying his hardest to basically ignore it the same way as with the camera bit. But Rhett just keeps beating the joke to the ground because of course that's what he does. And I have to imagine Herb was pretty unpopular right from the get-go, which is why, luckily, the number of appearances that he made on the show were relatively small. But every time he does pop up, I do have to admit that I start to wince a little bit. This was genuinely just a comedy bit that didn't work, and they really should have not brought it back after the first episode. Alright, so those were all the examples from proper GMM episodes, but like I said, this final one is actually not from an actual episode of GMM, but rather from an episode of GMM More. GMM More is the companion episode on their second channel, which is filmed directly after the main episode. The idea of GMM More is that it's a less scripted, more free-form, and more chill version of the main show, where they still might have guests or play little games and stuff, but there are no fancy graphics and it's a little bit more low-key. In other words, it's basically kind of them returning to their roots back when GMM was just a 2 or 3 man operation. And I will admit, sometimes the GMM More episodes are actually more fun for me than the main episodes, just because the conversation tends to be a lot more free-form. And this is also the reason why I also like listening to their podcast Ear Biscuits. Now, one of these episodes contained a segment where Link and Rhett were trying to jointly match countries with their main export. Now, like I said, Link is famously bad at the international darts game. Number one, because he just genuinely doesn't have a very good base of knowledge about most countries. And number two, because he doesn't listen to what Rhett has to say, despite the fact that Rhett knows his stuff most of the time. But this episode was an example that the door definitely swings both ways. Because once this game got started, Link was immediately elated to realize that Madagascar and vanilla were up on the table. His favorite flavor of ice cream is obviously vanilla, so he knew the answer straight away. And Rhett immediately ignores it. Now, the first time would have been excusable because, well, it's Link, and if Link insists on something, usually it's probably not correct. But as the game went on, and as they managed to check off more and more of the countries, Rhett just did not entertain the idea that Link was right about the Madagascar Vanilla. Now, I'll confess, I didn't know about Madagascar Vanilla. But you know, as there were fewer countries and fewer exports that made sense, you would have thought that Rhett would have at least given his best friend of 40 years a little bit more credit here. But no, he fucking doubles down on Link not being right about Madagascar Vanilla. Where it officially crosses the line for me when Rhett is forcing Link to give him a justification for his answer, because I totally feel for Link in this situation. A situation where you know the answer is right, but you don't know why you know it's right. Or at the very least, you can't verbalize it very well. It gets so bad that Stevie, the producer, is starting to chime in towards the end to try to get Rhett to listen to Link. Getting less and less subtle about the fact that Link is absolutely right about the Madagascar Vanilla. Till finally at the very end, Rhett relents, finally puts Madagascar and Vanilla together. The staff applauds. There is still this little moment of indignation that Rhett has at the very end, until he finally realizes that he was being a complete jerk. And so I do forgive him a little bit, because he clearly does seem sorry for having completely discounted Link in this particular situation. But yeah, this has got to be one of the most difficult Rhett-Link interactions to ever watch, specifically because of what Rhett is doing. Well, I hope you found that episode interesting. So tell me, what are your favorite obnoxious Rhett or Link moments? Leave them in the comments down below. I'm TheHande. See you on the next one.